Hello, everybody, and welcome to Music Industry Insights Worldwide, Volume 3. And today I have an amazing organization with us called Sound Without Sight. And we have Jay, we have Zenny, sorry, and Sarah. How are you all today?
Hello, hello. Yeah, Jay here. Very, very good. Thank you.
I'm Sarah, and I'm doing pretty well as well. Yeah.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Hi.
Nice to meet you. I'm Zenny, and I'm also doing very well.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for coming along today. And I really appreciate all of your time to come and share with the listeners some of your stories and also some of the issues and barriers that you've had to face and overcome to be where you are today. So thank you all so much. So do you want to tell the listeners a little bit more about where you are, what you do, and a little bit about the kind of issues that you face?
Yeah, shall I jump in first, guys?
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, my name's Jay. I'm project manager for Sound Without Sight, which is a online community hub supporting blind and partially sighted musicians. It's a very, very new project. And I think to rewind a little bit, it kind of was born out of my own experience as a partially sighted person in the music industry.
Um,
I knew growing up that I wanted to work in the music biz. I was very lucky to be born into quite a musical family, although my parents weren't kind of professional musicians. They were always doing kind of DIY music stuff. They were always putting on events and they were always in bands.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, I was naturally born into that world. And as soon as I could, started working with local artists, local musicians, in a kind of production type role, I guess. So working with people to make their kind of musical ideas a reality and develop them and all
yeah,
those kinds of things. Help people get their music online, basically. Um, and I kind of, um, I guess, verified those skills through my time at uni. So I
yeah,
did the Tonmeister course at Surrey, which is, if you're in that world, it's one of the courses you'd want to be looking at. Because I thought, stepping stones to doing it professionally, that'd be a really good thing to do, which it
yeah,
was. Met a load of good people, and at this point, I was really confident in my own ability in those kind of technical roles, and I guess the crossover between the technical and creative. So
yeah,
using the tools to get people's music made and also develop their ideas creatively as well. um so yeah, fast forward a little bit, I ended up in what I thought was my dream role, being a mix engineer on stuff that was getting played on the radio, so working in commercial studios in London in that whole scene, which was cool. I guess I was like, cool, I've made it. But when I was there, I guess I hit a few more barriers than I was expecting,
right,
uh, in terms of uh, not my own ability or ability to get stuff done, but doing it in the way that the industry expected me to do it,
yeah,
and fitting that role and trying to go through that pathway of being the kind of assistant engineer, and then from that point doing more mixing, and then from that point doing more production.
yeah,
um, I felt it was quite difficult to do some of those earlier roles in the chain.
yeah,
Um, yeah, and I guess we'll get into that a little bit more later. But I guess that's where the idea for Sound Without Sight came from. When I was in those roles and in those early years in my career, I didn't know where to go for advice.
yeah,
I didn't know how to meet other people who were visually impaired,
yeah.
um, just to kind of have a chat and be like, "How do you do this?" So pandemic happened, which obviously was a horrible thing in many, many ways, but it did also create the space for me to put some time into thinking about what could I do to address that barrier? How can I try and connect people? So started work developing what is now Sound Without Sight, which is this online community hub for blind and partially sighted musicians.
Well done, you. That's absolutely innovative and very, very well done. I'm super pleased that you're on the show today. Thanks, Jay. Does Zenny or Sarah want to share a little bit about where you are and what you do? What you do?
Yeah. So, basically, just adding on to what Jay's just said. I went to uni and did music at uni,
Yeah,
and I'm a little bit luckier in the fact that I managed to find a mentor through one of the sight loss charities, and they were a musician,
right.
and they could help advise to an extent. My degree was in vocals, and she's a guitarist, and I do like to play guitar, but that wasn't what I was studying. And at times when there were like loads of different barriers regarding like trying to find music schools and just other things that I'd need while I was studying, it just felt like so lonely. And I was like, where are the other people like me? Because I had this big network of people around me, and I'd ask questions. I'd be like, what's the best way of me doing it? And they'd be like, I don't know. And I graduated and thought, this is kind of hard. So many people around me that are like, find a real job. And then it was very like, oh, and then some weird act of fate. I've no idea, but I saw the internship advertised.
Yeah.
I was like, I may as well apply, because it's something I've been asking around, being like, where people say that blind people love music, so where is everyone? So I thought, okay, and I think that's why like this project is really invaluable, because I think me and Zenny are living examples of, yeah, we need a bigger community. I don't know if Zenny wants to add anything.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll start with intros quickly. I'm Zenny, 23, blind from birth. I'm a voiceover artist some of the time, and I'm a singer and songwriter.
Wow.
So in terms of like education, I had a decent kind of education, but in terms of music, I wasn't as lucky. I was lucky enough to do GCSE music, but when it got to A levels, without naming and shading, there were some hindrances where facilities weren't available, and I didn't know enough to be able to fight my corner to kind of get those facilities, because they were there and I could have got them. It's just people obviously didn't want to spend the money, and yeah, so unfortunately I didn't get to do music as an A level, even though I wanted to. So sorry, that was my doorbell. So I wasn't able to do music as an A level, but and it was the same as what you said as well, Sarah. Like my family in particular were kind of like, why don't you get a real job? Music isn't all that. Focus on academic stuff. Like music's not going to get you anywhere. And that was kind of the thing. Because I come from a family where like academics is quite highly regarded. So, kind of like science, maths, English, all that not fun stuff. So yeah, I mean, everyone liked my singing, but in terms of like a full-time job, in terms of music, people were just kind of like, it's not really gonna be stable. But I still carried on, because I think music for me is kind of more like an emotional expression. It's a way of therapy for me personally. Like if ever I'm feeling away, I'll just go and write a song, because I'll be like, that's the only way I know how to kind of put my feelings into words. And from then I've kind of done songwriting for people, not obviously big names or anything, but like, someone be like, I'm looking for a set of lyrics that are like this and like this, and I'll be like, okay, well, let's see what I can do. And I've vocaled a couple of things as well. And then in terms of Sound Without Sight, I was actually part of another organization that sent me a link to the internship role. And to be honest, I'd never kind of considered a role like that before. Like my imagination was just like, oh, I just want to kind of sing and write songs. And I was interested in kind of creating a vocal coaching business at some point, but I didn't really kind of imagine myself, I don't know, in the role of, the intern role. So when I applied, I think it was just, I was more curious, because it was something I wasn't planning on, and I wasn't planning to get it, to be honest. I was like, there's so many other people out there that probably have better skill sets than I do. So I was like, I'm not going to get it. And then all of a sudden I somehow got it. So that was great.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But yeah, it's been wonderful. And it's like completely echoing what Jay and Sarah said. Like, you know, it's really kind of lonely when you're the kind of only like blind musician and you feel like you're the only one because you can't find anyone that's the same. Like I've always said this, that there are so many new accessible tools out there now than there were before, but it's always difficult to find that information because it's all kind of scattered. Like in half the stuff I've learned through word of mouth from other musicians that are blind and visually impaired, because obviously we do stuff differently. Like, okay, for like in terms of production, we don't use a mouse or a trackpad. We use keys, so we're to use keyboard shortcuts, and just like little stuff like that. So yeah, so it's just, but it's not easy to always find that. So I'm really, really passionate about bringing all this information together and also creating, a community of other blind and visually impaired musicians. Just because we're all in the same boat, like, we're all we all love music. We just need that kind of extra kind of hand, and that's okay. And that's why I think Sound Without Sight is going to be so brilliant. And I'm really excited for the rest of my time and role, because so far we've been doing some really amazing stuff. But yeah.
And
that's
Saskia,
what you get from speaking to you all, actually, is that sense of community and belonging, and also a safe space, I guess, as well, where you can all come together and share your ideas and feel respected and welcome and part of something more than just yourself. And I think that's so beautiful. That I totally understand that isolation. Being trans myself, I'm often walking into rooms where I'm the only trans woman in the room. So that has its challenges, and it does make it harder, because I think you can talk to people that you feel get you, right? And I think this is what you're all saying, is you all help each other out and support each other, which is beautiful. I really like that.
Absolutely, because we all learn from each other. Like, although we're all, for example, like we're all blind or visually impaired to some capacity, like, and even if we're doing different stuff, we can still help each other, because it's obviously like it overlaps in terms of music.
Yeah.
And there's like so many things that you can learn, like, it's so difficult to find it because we can't just do like a normal quick search on the internet because it's different.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I'm learning so much. I'm learning so much. Thank you.
I think that barrier that we're talking about there is that access to information, right? And like, if you're navigating the internet using a screen reader, it can take forever to find what you want, if it's even there to begin with.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the reason, aside from connecting people, Sound Without Sight is also connecting pieces of information and collating them all in one place and trying to present it in a useful way. I think that's useful not just for blind and partially sighted people directly, but also the people that are supporting them. So it might be an employer within the music industry might need to access some information about how to support a new employee, or it might be, support staff within a school or a university. They might not have experience of supporting someone who is blind or visually impaired. So if we can present that information and give people like starting points and a breadcrumb trail to follow to then find more stuff, that's the aim, really.
Fantastic. That's super fantastic. And it's also kind of educating people as well as kind of supporting each other and collaborating, right? So do you do a lot of collaborations with each other and make songs together? Is that also another thing that you do?
I would love for that to be the case down the line. I mean, it's a very, very new project. So starting in the new year, we want to do kind of monthly, Zoom meetups to do that kind of direct like collaboration and directly connecting people rather than just through a forum or an email, and there are ways that you can collaborate in real time with other musicians. There's an app called Jamulus, and if you both have that installed and you're not a million miles from each other, you can now jam in real time on your instrument or using your production setup, or if you're a singer, you can do that and just work out songs and just I think that would be a really beautiful thing in the longer term.
Sounds fantastic. So can we talk a bit about some of the challenges and barriers that you've all had to face? So should we just go around one by one and just see some of the barriers and the challenges that you've had to face working in music and entertainment?
Yeah, I think for me, the challenge, as I slightly alluded to earlier, was actually being quite confident in my own ability on my own setup, growing up, finding my own ways to do stuff, and, on my home studio computer, i.e., laptop when I was a teenager, I felt great working in Cubase or Logic or whatever. Um, I think the challenge came when I had to do it by the book of the music industry, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Uh, and that kind of mobility as a recording engineer or a producer, going into a studio where you're not familiar with the setup,
Yeah.
if you don't have any site issues going on, you can slot in and fairly quickly you're up and running, right? Whereas I think I've only ever been to one studio that's got a movable monitor arm. Quite often the computer screens are on the other side of the mixing desk and they're just way, way too far away for me to ever be able to see.
Yeah.
Even with zooming in and enlarging stuff on the screen, which also takes time to get that stuff set up.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing. Like the physical studio environment isn't that inclusive right now, I would argue. And also the kind of culture of it. I think everyone goes through the stage, or if you want to be a producer in the commercial recording industry, you need to go through that stage of being the junior engineer or the assistant in the studio, which involves getting there, being the first one at the studio every day, being the last one to leave and lock up. And then you'll be doing stuff throughout the day. And at lunchtime, it's you that goes and gets the lunch for the artist. And like, you're just always doing stuff. And like, I think I would argue like that would lead to most people feeling pretty burnt out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But I feel like if you have any kind of disability, that kind of threshold for burnout comes a bit sooner.
Yeah.
And just trying to kind of force it to fit to kind of get to the next stage where you're working on stuff more directly and with more autonomy. That can take a bit of a toll, I think. And that kind of you can start feeling that burnout pretty quickly. If you're not feeling comfortable in the environment that you're working in.
And that takes time as well, doesn't it? That all takes time for anybody. So that's going to take even longer, isn't it, for certain aspects of you? And it's really interesting that you say that the studios are not that inclusive. So that's another thing that needs to be addressed, is how can we ensure that we get more people with disabilities in the studio as well? Because that's a really important point you make, is I'm often seeing that people with disabilities are getting forgotten about in music, and we can't have that. We must be inclusive and we must be diverse, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Zenny, would you like to tell us a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I was just going to say I absolutely agree with what Jay is saying, because well, obviously I'm not a producer, but I like singing.
Yeah.
And I often find that unless, okay, I don't know about you guys, but every time I go in a physical studio, they're usually very small little places somewhere, and then like there's always a lot of equipment and stuff, and sometimes it's not always the safest kind of environment. And well, like people who run the studios don't really think it's a safe environment, and they kind of get like, oh my God, you're blind, like how are you gonna like navigate? And it's like you're gonna break everything.
Oh.
So it's all just about, I think my biggest barrier, to be honest, is perceptions from other people, because and people might think, oh, but it's just who cares what people think, but well, it matters when they are the ones who run the studio. It matters when they are the ones who are trying to pick the talent for an event, because it's their perception that ultimately gives you that role. And so in terms of like physical studios, absolutely, like they're kind of difficult to navigate if people aren't willing to kind of assist. So that's definitely one thing. And then again, like performing as well, like it's difficult because people worry because you're blind. They're like, oh, like how are you going to navigate the stage? How are you going to do this? How are you going to do that? And it's fine to ask those questions, but it's the fact that when you assume that I can't do it, and you say, okay, well, we can't, it's just because it's so much easier to work with a sighted person. A lot of time, people don't want to kind of give you the time of day, which is quite sad. But it's it's a competitive industry, and that's for anyone, not even just if you have a disability. Like it's a competitive industry in general. Competitive, sorry. So, it's more difficult when you have a disability because not only are you kind of trying to compete for something that everyone else wants, you're also in their point of view at a disadvantage. So a lot of it is down to perception, I think. Like a lot of my barriers have always been rooted from perceptions. Like the reason I couldn't do music education like in A levels was because they thought and they assumed that I couldn't do it, or and because they assumed that they didn't want to kind of help to make it happen. So I think, I think perception definitely plays a big part, and also lack of access to information is a big barrier for me as well. Because if I had known what was available to me, I reckon I would have been able to do A-level music.
Yeah. That's a really great point you make, Zenny. Thank you for sharing that. And Sarah?
I also think that like when I was at uni, people or the tutors didn't know how to teach things in a way that's accessible. Because I remember when we were in lockdown, we started using SoundChat and we started using BandLab. And I was like, how do I use them with voiceover? And my tutors were like, let's start with how do you use voiceover. So I then have to teach them how voiceover is used.
Right.
And then they would then be like, oh, I forgot how much I use the trackpad. And I'm like, right, great. While we're social distancing. So they'd be stood like at the other side of the room, trying to give me instructions on what I need to do. And that whole time I'm there like, who's teaching who, and is this working, and are there other ways to do this? And I think that's because, like we've been saying, like finding the information is so difficult, like that I'm excited for the day where a music student or someone in the industry who will just be like, can you just go and Sound Without Sight, it'll all be there somewhere. Because and I think that will help eliminate a lot of the challenges that people are facing, because I think one of the biggest ones at the minute is sighted people want to help, they just don't know how. So there's a lot of ignorance at the minute. And it's like dealing with that without being hostile, because I don't think people are out there to hate on anyone. I think it's just, if you don't know, you don't know.
Sorry, Jay.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think going back to Zenny's point around, perceptions and preconceptions, I guess. I think probably the solution to that, although it's a long-term one, is increasing that kind of representation within the music industry, within the artists that are being promoted. Because right now, it's difficult to think of, someone in the last, who's quite early in their career. So everyone can think of Stevie Wonder, right? But someone who has started their career in the last 10 years, we did a bit of research at RNIB. So we polled nationally, who can think of a blind or partially sighted musician who started their career in the last 10 years? And it was 3% of people. I think less than 3 actually, but it rounded up to 3.
Wow.
And that's obviously a very, very low number. You compare that to who can think of a blind or partially sighted musician overall, and it's 90%. Everyone can think of Stevie Wonder or Ray Charles. But there are obviously barriers there that have made it more difficult for someone who is an up-and-coming artist to get noticed if they're blind or partially sighted. Maybe that's social media, or the kind of the way that you build yourself as an artist. You've got to be very self-driven, right? And you have to engage with all those social platforms. If you're not, if you aren't used to using that kind of very visual social media, that's difficult, right? It feels like there could be more support in that area. But one way that hopefully Sound Without Sight can support that in the shorter term is to showcase some of the good work that is happening. So there are blind and partially sighted artists, there are blind or partially sighted engineers, producers, voiceover artists, and it's like, how can we shine a light on that?
And see people on those platforms and see visibility, because it's also about when you can see yourself in a position, you can attain to be like that. You know that there's a way forwards. And I think that's something that I hold on to a lot of, is to see this diversity and inclusion, because if you can see something, you can be it. And I'm sure you all agree on that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah.
Just to add, I actually don't know what your opinion is, Jane, Zenny, but I remember like going back to Stevie Wonder, like whenever I struggled with, I don't know, like stage presence or something that I thought was quite visual, it would always be, but Stevie Wonder can do it. And I'm like, cool. It's such a weird position to be in, because if I was struggling with a vocal run or something, no one's gonna go, Whitney Houston could do it. Like, so I don't know where it comes from. And part of me is like, I don't care what Stevie Wonder can do. And then he probably has a much bigger team around him than what I've had. So but having those comparisons, it's not actually helpful either. Because we're all different, and to just generalize and stereotype, I don't think is helpful.
Yeah,
I think sorry.
No, it's okay, Karen.
I was just going to say, Sarah, I think you probably compare yourself because he's one of the only other people in the same, well, in the boat that you want to be in, that is in the same boat in terms of, visual impairment.
I don't compare myself. It's what other people have done, and I just find it bizarre, because I'm like, I'm the only thing that we have we're
in
just
common.
both blind. That's it. We're both blind. Apart from that, we're completely different.
That's, again, it's down to perception again, because people kind of think, oh, well, if one blind person can do it, then the other person can do it. There doesn't seem to be any recognition of, having differences. It's just that, oh, if one person can do it, then you can do it.
Empowerment kind of thing, isn't it?
Which is really silly.
Yeah, I guess so. But again, having people that, if they can do that, I guess it does also offer that hope that if they could do that, there is a chance that I could do that. And I think that does help in that kind of inspirational way.
Yeah, I think it does help to an extent, but it's about like kind of, yeah, like I think to an extent you can look up to these people, but again, it's about remembering that everyone's different. So like, Stevie Wonder, yeah, he's great, but he might have had access to other kind of tools or resources that some of us don't.
Great point.
But
I think it's important to point out, like, the industry is very different these days, and I think that's kind of what I was trying to say earlier, is that like the game is different now, right?
Yeah.
In the 60s, 70s, if you were a great musician and you knew the right people, you could quite quickly bypass, a lot of the kind of, breaking through stage and get there. You get playing on sessions and get noticed as a great session musician. And in theory, if you knew the right people, the pathway to being an artist that was getting played on the radio on Top of the Pops was a lot shorter than it is these days.
Yeah.
There's a lot more work goes into building your kind of your artist as a brand these days, and also the tools that you're using. If you're a producer, like, back in the day, I guess studios were a lot more kind of tactile, using just a physical mixing desk rather than nudging things around on your laptop inside the computer. You can get hands on a lot quicker, and I guess get those kind of concepts of how to shape and sculpt sound. And it was just a lot more kind of immediate, whereas you have to put a lot of work in these days to, get the assistive technology working for you. It's not quite as immediate, I would argue, to become a producer or a musician in the current kind of way.
Yeah, I get you.
And I think you've got to be quite big on social media these days as well. And
you do.
You could argue that's really visual. So
it is, absolutely, like, because I feel like a lot of sighted people, obviously, because they have the vision, there's always a thing about visual appeal, which is like really difficult for blind and visually impaired people, unless we have somebody else to like help. It's really difficult because, like, you know, for example, designing a cover art, you know, we don't know always what looks good and what doesn't because we can't see it. And, you know, equally like, in terms of like, okay, if someone's taking a picture of you for like your headshot,
Yeah.
like, well, oh, you don't know if that makeup looks great or whatever. And it's difficult because sometimes even if you get sighted help, they don't want to hurt your feelings if you look bad or like whatever else, like, or if the camera's at a wrong angle or, you know, such and such.
Thought of it like
So
that.
it's
I'm thinking so much. It's just like, wow, it's mind blowing how much you actually have to go through to just be at that position where a lot of us take for granted. And I think I'm really getting that from this talk. And thank you all for just sharing your stories. They've been super powerful and moving. And also just to learn, because I know we're running out of time, is if we can get more of this information sharing. Jay, where can people find your organization? How can people get in touch if they want to find out more and they want to get some of this information to help other people? You're on mute. Sorry, you're on mute.
Sorry. So yeah, obviously Sound Without Sight, it's an ongoing project. It's a work in progress, and I think it always will be. This stuff can never be completely done right. But yeah, we're assembling this knowledge hub and this community at soundwithoutsight.org. If you are a blind or partially sighted musician and would like to get involved, then please do. And even if you're not and you just want to learn more, maybe you're supporting someone who is, then yeah, please come and get involved.
Fantastic. We will share all of the information in the description below. And thank you all for coming along. Does any of you would like to leave your social media so people could contact you if they want to get in touch? Do you have an Instagram or social media or anything that people can get in touch?
I have Instagram and TikTok. She says, even though she complained about visual appeal. So my Instagram handle is Zenny official _, which is ZENNY official and then _. And then my TikTok handle, I actually don't remember what my TikTok handle is. Sorry, I'll get it in a second. It is okay, I might have to give it in a second because I'm kind of locked out of it for some reason.
Should we get Sarah? Sarah, have you got yours? Sarah probably can't hear me.
No, I'm not
No.
a social media person.
Fair enough.
The project itself, so Sound Without Sight, we're across most of the socials. So Sound Without Sight, all one word, on Instagram, and the others listed on the website as well.
Well, I'll be adding you all later on this evening. So yeah, expect an invite from me on there. And thank you all so much for coming along. Zenny, have you found yours yet?
Yeah, so my TikTok is ZennyJR07.
Fantastic. I'll be adding you on that as well. Thank you all so much. I'm sorry the time's a bit short because it's only a 40 minutes and we've actually got through that already. So it's gone really fast. Thank you all so much again for coming along. I'll be sharing this in a few weeks' time and I look forward to seeing you all soon.
Thanks for having us. It's been so great talking and like doing this podcast. So yeah, thank you for having us.
Thanks, Zenny. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
It's been amazing to have you all. Keep up the amazing work. And I can't wait to see you all in the future.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the time.
It's an absolute pleasure. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.